So this is Tom's first time in a Center for Spiritual Living, and I was feeling the need to explain, you don't really have to encourage this group to go a little wild. In fact, I find myself encouraging to dial back a little bit from time to time, but yeah, to whatever so what. It's good to be here today, and just blessed. Life is good. As you may or may not know, I was on spiritual retreat this last week in Las Vegas, and because only Centers for Spiritual Living would say, let's go to Las Vegas to have our convention, and so it was fun. It always takes me a little time to adjust to that energetic, and then once I'm there, I'm out, and I actually really love Vegas in the sense of just everything goes. There's such a diversity. You hear all kinds of different languages and see all kinds of different people and every possible combination of costume that you could possibly imagine. And so I'm happy to announce that next year, the Centers for Spiritual Living Convention will be in Salt Lake City. So I said to several people, we can't promise you women in pasties standing outside on the street, but, we'll have a good time. Trust me. Some of us do know some fun places to go. So it was absolutely a wonderful convention, and I learned a lot. And for those that, I like to practice transparency. I always say that for me, conventions are all about what happens in the coffee shops and over lunch and in the bar. It's who are you talking with, who are you connecting with, and just, I've been doing this for a long time, and I have some wonderful friends and colleagues that have joined me along this journey and have, so it's always great to have those times of connection and to see what's working and see where we're growing and see, just to be in community together. So I came back, and I'm really touched by Tom's song today because we convened. There's a very exclusive club that I belong to. We refer to it as the Martini Club, and my friends Barbara and Bob Grabowski and myself, and then we let others join. But so we're kind of the officers of the club, and we like to meet from time to time. So we had our meeting on Thursday night, and just talked and connected and laughed, and maybe this much gossip, not a lot, but most of it was pretty high-minded. Talked about upcoming events. Bob has been a minister in the international arena, has worked all over the world and working as an ecclesiastical officer, and just really wonderful man. So there's a convention in Geneva in this summer, and they've been trying to get me to go, and so I'm looking at it, not knowing how God will provide, but figuring that she knows what she's doing. We'll figure out something, right? So we just had a lovely time, wonderful connection, and then Friday, I get a call from a friend who tells me that Bob has had this massive heart attack on Friday, and went into surgery, and apparently he's doing pretty well. I mean, I've talked to Barbara, and he's doing pretty well and has gone through it, and we're all hopeful. But it was such a reminder for me of, once again, how precious our lives are. And we never know when that last conversation is. And that we want to be conscious and aware of the loving presence and the wonderful people that are in front of us all of the time, and to be sure to tell them that we love them. And so, anyways, he's doing well. We're holding them all in prayer and just trusting that there's a process unfolding that we can't even see or imagine. But it got me to thinking about this topic that we've been working on this month, about the real question. I think that the only question perhaps that matters at the end of our lives is, how well did I love? How gracious, how good, how much love did I bring forth in the world to those both near and dear, and those not so near and dear? You see, because that's the real test of it. was so busy convening that I didn't get to watch a lot of TV, which I found it to be a good thing, because it seems like you only have to watch about 5 minutes of news these days to feel pretty darn depressed about the state of life. And it occurs to me that there seems to be this ongoing struggle from the beginning of time with humanity that seems to be somehow about light and dark. Whether you call it good and evil, whether you call it light and dark, whether you call it unity and separation, whether you call it spirit and ego, there is this condition, it is the human condition, that says we are spiritual beings, but boy, do we forget that a lot. Boy, do we not act like it much of the time. And I was thinking as I was reading Rumi, I'm a great fan of Rumi, and more so. I love his relationship with the beloved and his sense of being drunk on the divine and that wild abandon to the unity of life. And I'm thinking, now how is it that the religion of Rumi is also the religion of ISIS? Right? How is it that the religion of the mystics, the great Christian mystics of St. John of the Cross and Meister Eckhart and hundreds of others, is the religion of those who've gone on crusades and killed and maimed and hurt in the name of the divine? How is it that we can take an idea and either bring forth greater good and greater love and greater joy and greater peace, or we just get stupid with it and decide that it's okay that in the name of whatever to harm and hurt? So it seems to me that we are all a part of this eternal struggle to become more conscious, to be more aware, to bring forth greater love, and we're all at choice. Today I choose to love more fully. You see, is a really powerful thing, because what I find is that it's very easy to move into the separated mind. You know, we teach unity, we teach oneness. There's only one life. That life is God. That life is my life. That life is your life. That life is everywhere, present always. Isn't that beautiful? Except, of course, unless you're a Republican. Or a Democrat. I want to be equal opportunity here. I don't want to leave anybody out, right? So our mind goes, yes, I believe in the unity and the love of all of life, but gosh, darn those whatevers. Filling your other. I was watching as we came together in high holy purpose as a spiritual community this last week, and then we got to bylaws. And if you ever want to see anything suck the spirit out of a room, and I watched how we kind of started as a group move into this less than gracious, kind, compassionate, loving presence. We just sung about the oneness of life and joy to the world and all that sort of thing. But then, oh, lo and behold, we're going to pass a resolution. And some people stood for the resolution and some people stood against the resolution. And then it got weird, you know, and it was like, oh, I'm going to the Martini Club. No. When in doubt, avoid, right? No, actually, I went to the gym. You'll be happy I went to the gym. Because, but I had to laugh because I thought, now here's a group of people joined together around a common theme, reading the same book, teaching the same book, saying we believe in the oneness of all of life. We believe that you can create life the way you want it. You can believe and have a greater experience of the divine until you get to bylaws. Right? So it is a human condition. Now, I don't know if you do this. I don't know if you have individuals or groups of people that you would hold as the other. But I know it is that sense of the other. I think it's almost a human thing that we have to separate ourselves. When once we separate ourselves, then we can justify all kinds of things. It's when we're in that state of consciousness that says, this is my brother, this is my sister, that it's very difficult to do anything that isn't loving and kind and compassionate. The Buddha spoke to this idea so often of the oneness of humanity, and there's a tradition in some forms of Buddhism that everyone refers to everyone as a relative and their title. So my uncle teacher, my grandmother podiatrist, I don't know if they have, whatever, but right? There's that sense of calling you mine, calling us forth our relationship before I recognize your title. And I think that's a beautiful thing. Because if it is true that we say that we are all part of the one life and that we are all extensions of the whole, then it must be so that each of us is divine in origin, even if not in action. And so as we've been learning and talking about learning to love differently, learning to separate out love from behavior, that I don't love you because you act a certain way, I love you because it's who you are. Now, your behavior may need some conversation. I heard Gene Houston say this first about those who are practicing unskilled behaviors. Isn't that a much better way to think of it? Like, wow, way to do some unskilled behavior there. Which implies the possibility that we can be more skilled. Certainly I have become more skilled as I've gotten older and wiser, right? So we are faced on an ongoing basis, this sense of separation. Now, in many spiritual traditions, there is a tradition of those who want to become the really in-depth practitioners of a spiritual tradition often will withdraw from the world. And they become nuns and monks. And they go into cloistered communities and they live a monastic life. And that's a beautiful thing. But for most of us, that doesn't seem to be an option. Most of us are getting to practice the spiritual life in the midst of this world. And that's a beautiful thing. The great speakers and teachers of the ages will teach us that it is important that we be in the world, that we do our work in the world, that we are, it's easy to be centered and grounded when you're on spiritual retreat, right? Nothing like a good old monastery to get you grounded and centered. Beautiful surroundings, all that sort of thing. But it's living in the middle of life that really calls forth our practice. Sai Baba used to have a phrase where he had a maxim that he said, hands in the world, head in the forest. Which is to say that in that tradition, you would go into the forest to do your spiritual practice. You would go on retreat into the forest and be in that place of connection with the divine and knowing who you are. But he said, it's the hands in the world. It's the same as that biblical injunction that teaches us to be in the world but not be of it. Now, this has been used over and over and over in all kinds of spiritual traditions. I will use it in a context today you've heard me use before, which is to say that even though we're in the world, we're also recognizing that we are bigger than the world in which we inhabit, that we are spiritual in origin. And so our identity is about changing that relationship to, rather than seeing ourselves as being in a condition that we need to bring spirit to, we see ourselves in a spiritual way of being, experiencing a condition. And it is the difference for everything, is it not? Because if you're a spiritual being, if you're whole and perfect and beautiful because of your divine inheritance, then you're just simply being challenged to recognize the truth. And it makes it easier. It makes it simple. So if you're experiencing a financial challenge, then we're sensing that it's not that there's a lack of abundance in our universe. It's simply my limited way of thinking that is presenting itself, saying, look, you're not completely healed yet. Do you guys have those experiences? I seem to have them on a very regular basis. Like, you're not so healed that you don't still have some work to do. So Sai Baba was saying it's more important to live a spiritual life while doing your work in the world than to go off and just renunciate the worldly life. It is where we really get to grow. It is where we get to change. Now, it's wonderful. It is beautiful and excellent to go on retreat from time to time, to withdraw from the world. Jesus had a very significant practice of leaving his ministry to go off into the wilderness, into the desert, to restore his soul. And we can all do that, even if it's only for a few moments in the morning. That we find a place to restore our soul, to commune with the One. But ultimately what we want to do is be bringing forth that which is within us into the world, to see the divine in all things. I was thinking about how, we're coming up on the 50-year anniversary of civil rights and all kinds of wonderful things that happened. And some of us who are of a certain age remember watching TV and watching the riots that took place and the marches and the crazed behavior that seems so hard to imagine today. My grandpa was a wonderful man. I'm so grateful for him. He was a father for me in many ways because my dad was pretty gone a lot. And so he taught me how to be a gentleman, and he taught me how to say yes, ma'am, and no, sir, and he taught me a lot of wonderful things. But he also was a product of the South. And while he was a good-hearted Christian man, he also grew up believing in segregation. He was a product of his culture. And so while he, like I said, he was a good man. He was not mean. He was not racist per se, but he had a perception of how life should be. Now we think about that and we think, how crazy is that? How crazy is that we would have separate bathrooms and hotels and, everything was separated by color. We think that's crazy. But it wasn't that long ago that was reality. And so we look to these great spiritual leaders, in particular Martin Luther King. And what I most admire about Martin Luther King was he brought a Christian faith of loving one another into the world. And he did not say, it is time for the blacks to have their turn. He said that all of us need to move forward as the beloved community. That we all, regardless of color, need to be in love, in community, in bringing forth that which is the best within us. And so now, today, 50 years later, we still haven't perfected it, but we're better, right? The things that we used to take for normal are no longer okay. We're watching that in our civil rights today as this whole question of who gets to get married is before us. In 50 years, people are going to say, really? What was the big deal? What was that all about, right? What was that about? I don't know. It was just crazy because we like to think, I'm talking broad generalizations, humanity kind of forgets that we're all one. Kind of forgets that there's only one life, one power, one presence, one divine being, that we are all some extension of it, and that we are here to bring forth the best that is within us. So I look at the world around us, and I say, boy, it appears to be a mess. And yet, I also know that there is so much right, so much good, so much wonderful thing happening. One of the highlights of this week for me was we got to go to dinner with some friends and realized that we have been friends for 25, 30 years. We all came out of youth ministry together. We used to go off and set up these camps for teenagers, and we would really come up with these great themes, and we'd just be immersed. We'd go on retreat, and they had to turn off everything. You know, we had them turn in their Walkmans as they came in the door, which was a struggle. A few of them got them, a few of them through. Every once in a while, we'd find a contraband Walkman going, or, you know, had to turn in their transistor radios. I mean, you know, it was just saying it was a number of years ago. But we'd connect and we'd deepen and we'd have these amazing spiritual experiences together. So it was really fun for the five of us to sit together and just laugh and talk about some of the crazy old days. But what was really exciting as I looked around that table was 4 of us have become ministers, each having our own pulpit. One is moved into as a practitioner, has her own ministry in that way, still doing good work in the world. But what was really cool was to get to kind of connect and talk about some of these kids who are now in their 40s, and the wonderful things that they're doing in the world, and that the way they're impacting others. And it just reminded me that our lives make a difference, right? Our lives make a difference. We are a part of a ripple. And you will touch people's lives in some way or another. At the end of your life, people are going to ask, how well did they love? How well did they live? How well did they serve? That's the real essence. And so for me, I mean, like I said, I don't know what to do about the world. But I do know what to do about my world. And my world, I choose to love more fully. My world, I choose to forgive more graciously. For my world, I choose to be a positive presence, even sometimes when I don't feel like it. You see, real deep spiritual work is not about being struck by the mood. Just want you to know. In fact, some of our deepest work will be by those who will come in the disguise of the other. But Jesus said to us, here's what I'm going to command you to do. And this is the radicalness of his teaching, is love those who persecute you. Pray for your enemy. Think about that. Isn't that the last last place we want to go with the other? How many of you prayed for ISIS today? Just saying. This is the radical teaching. Now, I'm not going to get all political because I don't have a clue and I wouldn't know what to do. I'm not saying that. But I am saying we are a part of a consciousness that is present on the planet today. And we get to be a choice. We get to decide whether I will be a more loving presence in the world or whether I will move into lower levels of thinking where we practice unconditional judgment and other fun things, right? Meister Eckhart, a wonderful 12th century Christian mystic and preacher who is brilliant beyond measure, said with this, he said, if one does not recognize God, the barrier lies within his own mind. For God is all things and has become all things within the individual. You see, this is all Ernest Holmes was saying. Ernest Holmes said to us, we may stumble, but always there is that eternal voice, forever whispering within our ear, that thing which causes the eternal quest, that thing which forever sings and sings. This struggle that we are in, whether you call it good and evil, whether you call it dark and light, whether you call it unity or separation, it is the spiritual quest to see if we can listen to the divine no matter what the circumstance, to see if we can be transcendent of the conditions, that we might be a greater presence of love, of compassion, of joy, of harmony, of peace. My sense and my feeling is that if we wait for the world to get straightened out, your peace is a long way off. But if we learn that in the midst of anything that is going on, we can be at peace. We can choose love. We can open our heart to be compassionate beings. Then we contribute to a world that works for all. We contribute to world peace by being at peace. As I said, I don't know what to do about the world, but I do know what to do about my world. And you know what to do about your world. I would start by your other. Wherever you're seeing the other, that's where the work is to be done. To heal the sense of separation, to lift them up into the light of the divine, to know that a greater good is making itself known. It's not saying you have to be in relationship with them. It is just simply making it safe. I like what Mary Morrissey says. I just want to make it safe for them to walk through the hallway of my mind. Right? And when you do that, you're making a contribution to a better world and a planet at peace. So know that you are loved. Know that you are valued. Know that you are appreciated. Know that you are a divine being experiencing more and more the truth of who you are. And that your call to greatness is not some grand and glorious thing. It is how well do you love today with the people around you. Let us pray. As we take this moment to turn inward, to simply honor and acknowledge this divine life, this one presence, this one power. So we know that there is one life common to all. We sense and feel that whatever name that we give it, it is greater than that. God, Allah, Yahweh, the 10,000 names. We're simply resting in the awareness of the one. And knowing that it is in this presence that we live, move, have our being. Simply knowing in this very moment the oneness, the unity, that this same intelligence that causes all things to be, that causes the planets to be in balance and in motion, causes the rains to fall, the flowers to grow, it is this very life that is our life. And so as I speak this word of truth, I speak it for each of us gathered here, knowing that there is indeed a spiritual reality that we are privileged to bring forth. So that wherever we feel challenged in our life, we're simply now transcending that to see that as yet an opportunity to bring forth greater love, greater light, greater joy, greater abundance. We begin today by bringing to mind the other, however we have identified that, to know that this becomes the opportunity for greater forgiveness, for greater love, for greater compassion. We forgive ourselves for our limited understanding. We forgive them for their unskilled behavior. And we choose to be the ripple of love in the world in this moment. We know that as we accept and practice unconditional love, our relationships are healed and transformed. We know that as we stand and bear witness to the presence of the divine in all things, we open ourselves to greater abundance, to a greater experience of this rich, powerful life that we are participating in. joyously giving and unconditionally receiving of the divine bounty. We know that we move forward with clarity, with conviction, that we are whole, perfect beings, and we allow our bodies to be the temple of the divine expressed in wholeness and well-being. How good it is to bear witness to the fundamental truth that the divine is all there is, and that all is well. And as we seek the new possibility, it emerges through us. We bring forth that greater light, that greater love, that greater possibility. What a privilege it is to live this life, to be an active participant in consciousness, in awareness, in bringing forth truth. And so I'm grateful as we speak this word for this spiritual community that serves as a beacon of light, that helps to remind those in search of their true and divine self. We bless this community. We extend a blessing from this place to our brothers and sisters around the planet. Today we are knowing each and every child of the divine is our brother, our sister, our aunt, our uncle, our grandchild, our grandparent. For we are one. We're simply knowing that we exist in a world of high potential and possibility. We're seeing a planet at peace and a world that works for all. And as is our custom, we bless all priests, all rabbis, all ministers, teachers of every faith. For we know the oneness of the divine. Therefore, we celebrate pathways to that understanding and that fulfillment. How good it is to proclaim this truth, to know that God is, all is well, that there is a law of consciousness working upon the thought and the belief that we hold. And so I am grateful that the word that we speak goes forth to be a blessing to all. It is with a joyful and grateful heart that I give thanks that this is so. And I release this word into that law knowing that it is established. I name it good and very good, as together we say, and so it is.
I am so blessed, I am so blessed, I am so grateful